This is a love letter to Scrivener, but like all true love, there's definitely moments when I may still love Scrivener while not really liking it. I've written 6 or 7 novels using Scrivener, and today I'm going to share how I use the program and perhaps more importantly, why. Before we get into how I use the app though, let's take a step back and figure out what Scrivener even is, because it is a lot. Word processors have been around for a really long time. You might even consider the earliest typewriters word processors, but the first program for a personal computer was called Electric Pencil, written and released by Michael Schreyer in December 1976, almost 10 years before I was born. Since then, hundreds of word processors have arrived to make all kinds of writing easier, from drafting letters to doing homework to writing novels. For a long time, Microsoft Word dominated the landscape. Arguably, it still does, though web-based apps like Google Docs are making significant inroads. Throughout college, I tried and failed to write my first novel using Word. Though I didn't consider it at the time, it's pretty easy now to understand why I failed. Word is clunky, cluttered, a do-everything program focused on business. When Scrivener was released in 2007, it promised an experience that focused on long-form writing, combining several aspects of the novel writing process into a single app. Research, outlining, writing, editing, publishing. You can do it all in Scrivener. And I started using Scrivener in 2011, after they released version 2.0 on the Mac, and it immediately, almost magically, transformed my ability to focus on writing. I've often heard it said that external tools like keyboards or pieces of software don't really matter, that if you're a true writer or artist, you'll figure out how to pen your masterpiece with nothing more than napkins from your local diner and a quill. But that's a romanticized viewpoint and doesn't really reflect how our minds move, how our thoughts flow. The tools we use are, in fact, a deep part of our writing process and can make the difference between writing a novel and never completing one. All that is to say, Scrivener is an essential tool in my life. When I sat down to think about making this video, I tried to hone in on exactly why that is, finding it exceedingly difficult to pick apart the interplay of features that make the app so alluring. In the end, I decided that it comes down to 3 main concepts: organization, portability, and focus. When you open a new Scrivener document, the app creates a .scriv file which holds all the content for your project. This includes research, cover art, character studies, compile settings, and more. In other words, all the work that is your novel lives within a single file. As a quick aside, this can be somewhat risky. A corrupted file means your work might be gone, so frequent backups and exports are a good idea. You'd think that using a proprietary format like this would be limiting in other ways, but the folder structure is as flexible and malleable as you'd want. You can organize your work however you like, no matter your writing process. I keep things pretty much how Scrivener recommends when you create the file because it's sensible. First, I put 5 files in my research folder. First is a general document I call Ideas, which is just text pasted from my Notes app on my phone. The second is an outline. I prefer to keep a short outline of my entire book in a single document so I can scan it and modify it as needed. It's the 20,000 word overview. I have another outline as well using the note card functionality of Scrivener, where each chapter can be viewed as a card. The third file contains terminology specific to my book. Since I write a lot of grounded fantasy, my novels tend to have at least a few made-up words. The fourth file is a summary of the book. It's usually about 2 pages long, and it summarizes the entire plot. The fifth and final file contains character and place descriptions. Sometimes this includes imagery, like a map of the landscape. My manuscript folder is straightforward, containing a series of individual files, one for each chapter, and that's it. Some authors may find it necessary or helpful to maintain vast amounts of additional information, such as research and notes, but I like to streamline the process to always keep the actual writing in central focus. When I get too distracted by world building, I might never actually sit down and write. For example, I once tried using an iPad app called Story Planner, which does what it says, but wound up getting me too tied up in minutia when I should have already started my first draft. The bottom line is that Scrivener is flexible enough to accommodate both extremes and anything in between. And portability is key. I like to have access to my work wherever I am, and Scrivener, after much delay, finally meets that need. Whether I'm on my Mac or Windows computer, my iPad, or my phone, I can open my book via Dropbox, and this is great. I'll get one caveat out of the way though, which is the lack of an Android app. It took years and much drama for the release of an iOS app, and I doubt an Android app will ever come. I used to be an Android user, and I reluctantly switched to an iPhone because being able to open my novel and make some edits while out and about was just that important to me. If you can stomach that limitation, then you too will have access across all your devices. Also, I'll say that I can't really blame the Scrivener team for the decision to omit Android. They're not a big company with, to my knowledge, only one primary developer for Mac and iOS, and not a lot of help otherwise. As someone who has developed cross-platform mobile apps in the past, I can say that building an Android app just isn't as simple as developing for iOS, nor is it as lucrative. Speaking of iOS, don't expect the full desktop functionality on the mobile app, although surprisingly, you can accomplish a ton on the go. You have access to all your files, you can create new ones, style text, and even compile the document, albeit with fewer options. On your phone, you'll probably want to stick with just editing, like I do. On the train, or even on the toilet, you can pull out your phone and make a few adjustments without any hassle. You might even notice some errors you missed on a larger screen. I know I often do. And you might not find all the same features across iOS and PC, but the iOS app is robust enough to get plenty of work done on the go. You can even write entire novels on your iPad, something I've done myself. Scrivener has a lot of features, which is why the composition mode is so terribly important. Despite all the folders, settings, and clutter, I spend 97% of my time in composition mode. And press this little button and your writing fills the screen. You can adjust the font size, color, highlight color, background transparency, pretty much everything about how the full screen mode works. But at the end of the day, you're getting a screen filled with text and little else. Sometimes I like to turn on the focus mode to concentrate on a particular paragraph, but I usually just keep the entire page in view. While writing the first draft in particular, I also switch the typewriter mode on, which keeps the line you're typing at the center of the screen, as if the paper were moving through your screen rather than words filling a static page. So this is how Scrivener helps keep me organized, focused, and connected. There's a ton of other useful features, but none of them contribute to the reasons why I choose to write using Scrivener. For example, the compile feature is arguably Scrivener's most sophisticated function. It's almost infinitely customizable to a fault. I often run into issues that drive me to the brink of insanity. For example, I once couldn't get my paragraphs to indent in Kindle or ebook format no matter what. I wound up copying the entire text of my novel to a new Scrivener file to get it to work properly. When it works though, it's amazing. You can take your novel and export it in a ton of formats with different stylings applied to each. It's just plain useful. And there's about a zillion other features you might find helpful as well, like taking document snapshots to roll back changes, adding metadata and keywords, multiple views for your files, word count and goal tracking, and plenty more. It's also worth noting that Scrivener hasn't yet adopted a subscription model like other writing apps. You pay a one-time fee and that's it, aside from the occasional major upgrade. But this isn't an exhaustive and tedious rundown of Scrivener's features, something you can find on their website easily enough. Just a review covering why I, in particular, spend so much of my life in this single app. Now, it's not all flowers and roses. there's some notable downsides to using Scrivener. One major concern is the speed of the software's development and updates. As I mentioned earlier, Scrivener runs a lean team. For a long time, I used a Windows computer at one location and a Mac at another. The Mac version of Scrivener was updated to 3.0, and the Windows version was not for years. Release deadlines came and went with no indication of progress. Eventually, the team released a public beta, but after encountering a few bugs, I decided to hold off until the final release. The development of the iOS app was similarly plagued with issues taking years longer than expected. The release across all three platforms, 4 if you include iPadOS, is pretty stable right now, but that's not to say it'll remain so in the future. Another downside comes if and when you need to work in other apps. Maybe you use Grammarly to check your writing. Well, you'll need to sync to an external folder using the RTF files as a workaround, or use your iOS Grammarly keyboard in a less than ideal fashion. Basically, most apps you'd like to use to edit or modify Scrivener files require workarounds. Even apps like Pro Writing Aid, which claim to support Scrivener editing, have multiple compatibility issues that actually put the integrity of your edits at risk. On the plus side, I haven't encountered any issues that are unsolvable, just annoying to deal with. I think you can see by now that I wouldn't hesitate to recommend Scrivener to anyone who's looking to write long-form fiction or nonfiction. There's just no other app quite like it, and I'm not sure there ever will be given the limited addressable market. I may film another video comparing Scrivener to some of the other apps I've tested like Ulysses, but that'll be for another day. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, and I'll see you again soon.